Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 26th of April, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information from the National Weather Service, and you can do that easily by calling 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. That'll take you to your local weather forecast office serving your part of Alaska. And if you can't find what you want, send us an email at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. That hits the whole TV weather team. Or just send it to me at david.snider, and I'll be happy to answer your questions there. Of course, we're on Facebook, on Twitter, and NWS Fairbanks. You can find them on Instagram. They always post some great pictures from the interior there and right around the weather office. And boy, great stuff all the way around the interior there. We'd love to see your pictures. We'd love to share your pictures. Make sure you email those to us or just share them on Facebook or Twitter that way, and we'd certainly like to put them on the show. So show us what you got out there in Bush, Alaska, and we'll put it on here. Here's the way it looks out in Bush, Alaska today as far as the rivers go. Breakup is happening now, and across the region in the upper Kuskokwim all the way down to Nikolai, the water seems to be at least some open, if not mostly open in some cases there. So a lot of changes there in the higher terrain, but it hasn't quite made it all the way down to the beyond Nikolai just yet. So changes are happening, and that's how breakup occurs from top to bottom. And as you look at the Nenana, you can see that conditions are changing there, mainly in the upstream areas there. It hasn't quite made it to the Tanana Valley just yet, of course, and all the way in the upper Tanana, it changes there anywhere from mostly open to some open. As you have conditions to report in your village, please do contact the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. They'd be happy to entertain your questions and answer any of your concerns and talk to you about those. And of course, the Alaska River Watch team from the state of Alaska and the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center will be moving out probably in short order. So once that starts, you'll hear about them moving up and down the Kuskokwim and the Yukon River. So thanks for your reports, and we'll have this update for you until breakup is over, as declared by the River Forecast Center. Here's a look at how things played out across southeast, south central, and the interior. For the visible satellite picture, I want you to pick up on a couple things. First of all, did you see that blossoming of clouds here across the lower and middle Yukon Valley into southwest? That blossoming is convective weather. That means upward moving air with the heat of the day, building showers and at times and eventually thunderstorms. Haven't had too many of those yet. But we're really close. In south central today, we had enough heat in the middle of the day and enough moisture in place that if you look carefully here, you can also see those bubbling clouds around the Cook Inlet region, and showers have been developing. Some folks have reported hail or soft hail, that is hail that just can't freeze all the way as it falls and it moves up and then eventually falls back down. Those towering clouds just aren't tall enough to support that just yet. Give it a few more weeks and it won't be very hard to pull that off. Southeast today, a beautiful day. Clouds were moving in from the south and southeast. Temperatures made it back into the mid to upper 50s again, all the way from Skagway down to Juneau and Hoonah. Just a beautiful day. Temps there, I believe, were as warm as 56, maybe 57 degrees where you are. On the other hand, it was a little bit colder up north, and if you look carefully, you can see how this little area of cloud cover across the coastal plain and the North Slope doesn't move too much. Watch as I put this into motion. Look at that, just kind of stuck right in place. That is ice fog. And for places around Kuparuk and Barrow and Dead Horse all the way out toward Point Lay, Temperatures were holding around 5 to 6 below this morning. I think Barrow might have been about 6 above actually, but most of those areas were on plus or minus 5, 10 degrees or so of zero. So cold stuff this morning, but that was only limited to the areas up north. Everywhere else had a very mild morning by comparison, south central and southeast included. Out across the west, you can see some breaks in the clouds all the way in the lower and middle Yukon Valley before the heat of the day there, and some of that was that drier air being pulled off the mountains. All of this is wrapping into a large circulation across the central Aleutians that's driving unsettled weather across the Bering. Periods of showers and clouds and occasional poor visibility, especially if you're trying to move in and out of Bethel today, wreaking a little bit of problems there. So hopefully that changes in the next couple days. But in the meantime, our low pressure system out in the west hasn't budged. Here's how it looks at the surface. Low pressure across the eastern Gulf at 998 millibars, sloshing a few showers into southeast and also warm air. Mild days there. Showers across south central today and a few across the mountains as you move across the Alaska Range. And then we run into a stationary boundary close to the Brooks Range, and north of that is the cold and the fog and the flurries for the North Slope communities. That's a 1,022 millibar high. Across the southern Bering Sea, a 992 millibar low. Periods of fog around the Pribilofs today and again in Bethel. Most of that was heavier this morning, of course. For southeast, we'll see a few areas of light rain across a large part of the panhandle, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a tremendous soaker. The wind's probably not coming up too much. However, gales will be likely across areas in the southern outer coast. A little bit more significant wind as you head further south of Sitka out toward the Clarence Strait. Watch for periods of showers across the southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, southwestern Alaska, through the Alaska Peninsula and the central and eastern chain. And there's still enough cold for areas of snow from St. Matthew to just north of Nunivak Island. St. Lawrence Island was seeing snow earlier today. And around parts of the Seward Peninsula up toward Shishmaref and eastward back into Kotzebue Sound and Kotzebue itself. Watch for a few areas of showers mixed with rain and snow. Most of that looks to be east of Fairbanks, and places like Eagle probably have a better chance of seeing that. Up north, while the cloud cover above may be clearing out, there's still the potential of seeing some fog. Though with high pressure moving eastward, the risk of that really heavier fog, at least in our forecast right now, tends to stay a little bit further east and moving east. We'll keep it in closer to the coast as we go through Thursday and Friday, but you'll notice that seems to diminish on the maps. Across the central and southern parts of the Yukon Territory, there's enough instability there for showers to continue, and that's going to help draw in more westerly wind, or west to east moving wind, I should say, into southeastern Alaska. Watch for areas of light rain there. Across southwestern Alaska, some showers across the YK Delta and Bristol Bay region, a better chance for some light rain as wind is moving closer to the Alaska Range. On the other side, it still looks drier around the Cook Inlet region, but as we saw today, and with a little change expected for tomorrow, the showers could pop up again, especially around the mountains or on the east side of Anchorage. Across the Alaska Peninsula, down through the chain, some showers there. And as we get into Friday, look what happens out in the west. A new front moves in fairly quickly, a 970 millibar low near the Kamchatka Peninsula. That will strengthen southerly winds across the central and eastern chain, so you'll see those winds changing on the marine maps here in just a few minutes. Rain and snow showers possible across the higher train, and most likely it is going to be showery across southwest again, Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound, and the Kenai Peninsula, as well as parts of southeast as we go toward the end of the week. Here's a look at temperatures today. As I said, in the southeast, it was fairly mild. 2 o'clock, we saw readings in the 40s and 50s. By the end of the day, we're in the mid to upper 50s. There's 61 already around Skagway. 40s and 50s for Prince William Sound, 54 in Anchorage, 51 in Talkeetna, 46 for Fairbanks, 49 in Eagle, 24 in Fort Yukon today. And Anaktuvuk Pass shows that big change. 1 degree there and everywhere on the North Slope in the single digits and low teens today. 20s and 30s for Kotzebue Sound, 42 in Nome. It was 46 in Unalakleet. McGrath saw temperatures back in the mid-50s by the mid-afternoon, 47 in Bethel. Around Bristol Bay, 40s and 50s there, all the way down into the Alaska Peninsula, mid-40s for Sand Point, Cold Bay, and Falls Pass, 37 in St. Paul today, and lower 40s for the central and western chain. Now, overnight lows will stay mild. Most areas should stay at or even above freezing for south central and southwest. Nome, you're at 34. Looks like Shishmaref hold at 23, though, and around Barrow, at least 0, maybe even colder a little bit further east toward the Beaufort Seacoast, where there's just been no sun today. Upper 20s are expected overnight from Eagle down the international border toward Northway, Prince William Sound in the mid-30s, and southeast will hold in the lower 40s with high temperatures there back in the lower to mid-50s. Tomorrow, watch for clouds and showers once again. 40s and 50s around Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island near 50 degrees, lower to mid-50s for South Central. The middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks, mid-50s for you. 36 around Fort Yukon, Bettles closer to 40. Arctic Village 27, lower teens for the Arctic coast. Kotzebue Sound in the 20s and 30s. It looks like Nome should see a high closer to 40 degrees tomorrow, and McGrath in the mid-40s there with places like Galena in the lower 50s. 38 around Nunivak Island, 30 for Gamble and St. Lawrence Island, 36 around St. Paul, and into the Alaska Peninsula mid-40s there with central and western chain back in the lower 40s. Flying weather shows IFR conditions are going to hold for a large part of the Seward Peninsula in the morning, all the way down the southwest coast, Nunivak Island and the Pribilofs. Watch for hit and miss IFR around Haines and Skagway and across the higher terrain and through some areas around Tanita Pass and up around the middle Tanana Valley and eastward. You'll see that diminishes tomorrow, and so do the IFR conditions around Tanita Pass, so improvements expected there fairly quickly. Watch for MVFR to IFR across southeast, and IFR conditions should ease across the west and southwest and the eastern Bering Sea coast, including places outside of Bethel. However, the Pribilofs may hold at IFR. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktivik and Adigan Pass look pretty good for your daytime tomorrow. As we get into the Alaska range, though, notice those changes. MVFR to IFR conditions, hit and miss around Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. Looks like Lake Clark may have a little bit more trouble with that than Merrill Pass tomorrow. Rainy Pass is going to hold in the afternoon for MVFR conditions. Same goes for Windy Pass. Isabel Pass right now looks pretty good most of the day. Mentasta Pass should turn over to VFR as the day goes on. Tanita Pass, we'll see a start early in the day around IFR, but some improvements should be seen by the afternoon. So watch for VFR on the eastern side. On the western side, you could have just a little more trouble to get started, but improvements during the day. Portage Pass, MVFR, and Chilkoot and White Pass expected to start at IFR with improvements throughout the afternoon. Freezing levels show that warmer air aloft is still working its way northward, now over Norton Sound. The surface freezing line still out ahead of that. But remember yesterday we were talking about the chance for some mixed precipitation or perhaps some light freezing drizzle. If that happens, you'll see a warning or a watch issued from the National Weather Service in Fairbanks. But these are the kinds of conditions that can set that stage to make that possible. Right now I don't see a big chance of that. But it is certainly something to watch as you're heading out into the northern Yukon Delta and into the eastern sections of Norton Sound. Out across southeast, freezing levels as high as 2 to maybe nearing 4,000 feet up around Haines and Skagway, and about 2,000 feet as you're moving into the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys and southward toward the Kenai Peninsula. Icing potential, you betcha. There is plenty of moisture lurking around this low pressure system that's out here, pulling in all the moisture up in here. And you can see levels there between about 2, 3, maybe even 4,000 feet as you move eastward just a little bit. Right now, icing potential is still holding at the lighter end of the categories there, isolated, moderate. And with the towers that are trying to build out there that aren't being horribly successful just yet, just remember that convective weather certainly implies a greater icing risk there, as well as isolated areas of low-level wind shear and turbulence. So be on your guard. It's that time of the year. Out across the west, a ridge is building quickly into the western Bering Sea. Here's our low pressure out ahead of it, and this trough is going to try and swing through into the Gulf as we head toward the weekend. Up north, winds are fairly light across the interior at the jet stream level, and high pressure remains in control at the moment. 9,000 feet, we have a broad southwest flow pushing moisture toward the south central and southeastern coastlines. Wind speeds are fairly light right now. You can see a little bit of a trough here just offshore of northern parts of southeast. Winds are very light across the interior, generally southerly, until you get to the eastern Beaufort Seacoast and they become a little more east to west. At 3,000 feet, our southwest flow is still in charge of the Gulf. Winds remain fairly light across the west, but notice we have a little bit more of a southerly component across the YK Delta, 5 to 10 there, and over Kodiak Island. And our east and southeasterly winds are a little bit more predominant across the Brooks Range and Kobuk and Noatak valleys. Look for light winds out west to become significantly stronger at the level across the western chain, 50 to 90 knots there at 3,000 feet. Turbulence in. Not a lot to talk about, but we are going to talk about it here for central and southern parts of southeast. Remember, we said we had an option for some gale force winds across some parts of the southern outer coast, and we're going to watch for that below 4,000 feet to bring us a little bit of light to isolated moderate turbulence tomorrow for the southern panhandle. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with your marine weather and sea ice update here in just a few minutes.
Adventure and excitement certainly describe this man. The head coach of the NFL's Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Sam Wyche. You couldn't find a busier person who still finds the time to fly.
The opportunity to fly would also be functional for me because I do a lot of banquet speaking. I go places and need to be somewhere at 5:30 in the afternoon and would still like to get back that evening and not kill all day long in an airport or in a car driving somewhere. Plus just the fun of it. It's relaxing for me.
Relaxation isn't a word you would normally associate with being a pilot. But for Sam and a lot of us, that's just what it is.
As a football coach, I'm constantly worried about what players to play, whether to go for it on 4th down, what strategy to employ, and I can get up in that plane on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon before a Sunday game and lose myself. And for an hour, finding holes in the clouds, I can forget about football because your attention has to be totally on that airplane when you're in the airplane. It is a serious business, but it's a very relaxing one.
Sam has to be pretty smart to be an NFL head coach, but you don't have to be a genius to learn to fly.
The skill is learnable by just about everybody. And the mental part of it, just like anything else, if you put the time in and do the studying that you have to do, which is more fun than study, you can learn it.
Even though Sam now owns an airplane, he started out by renting. As a matter of fact, about 2/3 of the pilot population rent when they want to fly. And renting definitely has advantages.
The nice thing about renting an airplane is you go out and you get in the airplane, you fly somewhere, and maybe you're in the air for an hour, and once you get there, you have lunch or you visit friends and you're there for 3 or 4 hours and get back in the plane and fly back. You may have had the plane all day, but you're only paying for the time that you're actually flying the airplane. So a 2-hour cost may benefit you a full day's enjoyment somewhere else.
Like most of us, learning to fly has been personally rewarding for Sam.
I enjoy getting in an airplane because it's beautiful up there. You get above the planet Earth. You can look down and see the relationships of places that you visit on the ground. You can see exactly how small you are in this big scheme of things at times. It puts a lot of things in perspective for you. But there is a freedom and there's a spirit up there that's just different. I think you'll have to get in the plane, get behind the controls and lift off, get up about 5,000 feet one time and everyone knows what you're talking about.
One person for whom aviation has become a thoroughly enjoyable part of her life is Mary Lou Bowman. Her children were in college out of town, and she wanted a way to see them without the long drive.
As I passed by a little airport near our home, I thought that would really be fun to learn to fly. And as I asked my husband about it, he encouraged me to go ahead, and I thought maybe I'm too old to start this, but it was so much of a challenge and so much fun that I continued to get my ratings and go ahead.
Mary Lou's hobby turned out to be more valuable than she first thought. Her husband, Don, a produce distributor, had designs on her newly acquired skill.
Right. I think we saw originally a need in the business. Being in the produce business, we go to a lot of out-of-the-way places, farming communities, things like that, where the product is grown and packed and so forth, and not accessible by airline, and just no way to get there very quick unless you can get into their small airports, and that was really a great benefit for us and what we were trying to do as far as the business was concerned. Take, for an example, a trip to Florida, where Florida has several different growing areas, the middle part of the state, down toward the Everglades and on into Miami and south of that. We can leave here early in the morning, visit all 3 of those, and still get back in the same day. And we couldn't do that any other way.
Beginning something new later in life may seem on the surface to be a bit daunting. Mary Lou didn't learn to fly until she had children in college. Initially, she had the same doubts you might imagine you would have in the same situation.
I started when I was 44 and really thought at the time, will I be able to do this since I'm getting a little bit older and I haven't studied? I haven't been to school in a long time. And I did all the ground school on my own, got the books and studied and passed all the writtens. And it was exciting. It was exciting to see what I could learn and what I could achieve.
While most pilots today are men, that's becoming less true all the time. Mary Lou has some advice for women contemplating aviation.
You shouldn't back off from learning to fly just because you're a woman, because it is a big thrill, and you can do it just as well or maybe better than the men.
The benefits of being a pilot is a common theme you'll hear when talking to people who have earned their wings. Just listen to Don Wyckoff, who grew up in a flying family and has been flying since he was a teenager.
Basically 300-400 miles away is a real comfortable little trip for a weekend, and that instead of taking you 8, 9, 10 hours to drive there, you can be there on a nice day in 3 or 4 hours. And instead of having the drudgery of driving those 10 hours, you can have 3 hours of your hobby en route to your weekend getaway.
Don also cherishes the camaraderie among pilots.
I think you'll find if you were just to fly from point A to airport B and land, walk out on the ramp, you'll probably strike up a conversation with someone that you've never met before, and chances are you'll never see again, but you have a common bond. It's the fact that you fly airplanes. And generally you'll find that whenever you're around another pilot, immediately the conversation strikes, so that no matter how hard your wife kicks you in the shin or anything like that, you're gonna be talking about airplanes. And it's a unique bond.
Don echoes the sentiments of not only Mary Lou and Sam, but most others who enjoy the privilege of flight.
Flying to me is an absolute bug. It's almost addicting. When the skies are clear and it's blue and you can see forever, you're not really interested in taking a ride in a car unless it's taking or driving your car down to the airport to go fly an airplane, because the conditions are perfect and you can go out and just kind of experience the freedom, be on your own, in control of your airplane. And it isn't work, it's fun.
These folks made the decision to step out of the ordinary and learn to fly. They're the ones who will be flying, not driving for hours, to take the kids to Grandma's. And while other people are stuck in traffic trying to get to those great resort destinations, they'll be out of their airplanes and on their way to the beach, the ski slope, or the golf course. The trip that's an all-weekend affair for most is a day trip for these busy, productive people who want the fun but don't want the hassle. And for them, those nearby getaways are now just a long lunch. The magic of flight. It happens some 50 million times a year. And for people just like you and me, getting to know your way around this new world can be as big a challenge as flight training itself.
Here's a look at today's Sea Ice Edge. You can always get the latest information as well as concentration and thickness of the ice by going to weather.gov/Anchorage, and 5-day outlooks as well, and seasonal outlooks are there anytime you want. You can see the areas in light blue are areas of concentration below 80%, and that could go as low as almost zero, not sea ice free, but getting close. And then areas of white are showing concentrations above 80%. You'll notice those areas of white are getting smaller and smaller. And we're looking at areas from the Kuskokwim Delta all the way out toward Nunivak Island, St. Matthew, and then northward toward the Bering Strait. We have the easterly flow pushing a lot of the larger pack ice toward the west, and that's moving more areas of ice away from the western coast. So things are opening up in Norton Sound and across the northern Yukon Delta and in the Kuskokwim Delta, and still moving ice toward St. Matthew, but away from Nunivak Island and toward St. Lawrence Island. So changes continue. That's the most important thing to remember, and with warm air moving through, conditions will continue to melt out there. We're still not completely sure that the northern parts of Cook Inlet are sea ice free, but we're probably getting very, very close. Here's a look at southeast. Southeasterlies in the Clarence Strait, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Southerlies going through the Northernland Canal, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea, but you'll notice the outer coast experiencing onshore winds 25 to 30 knots from Yakutat all the way down to Craig with a 9-foot sea in the north. And then where those winds are a little bit stronger down south, you get into the 15-footers there from Sitka south toward the Dixon entrance. Winds diminish there as we get into Friday. Southwesterlies across the outer coast, and seas diminish as well, 6 to 8 feet. Northwesterlies in the Clarence Strait, southeasterlies moving into Stevens Passage at 15 knots, and southerlies continue in the Lynn Canal, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea on Friday. Winds across south central remain generally light, 15 to 20 across the Cook Inlet into Shelikof Strait with 4 to 6-foot seas there. Small seas and light winds in Prince William Sound. Should be a good day in the Sound, minus a little bit of rain. Across the western Gulf, 15 to 20 knots there, 6-foot seas from the eastern Barren Islands all the way up to the eastern side of Kodiak Island for your Friday. Light and variable winds up north, southeasterlies at 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Light winds across Cook Inlet, and southeasterlies west of the Barrens, 15 knots with a 4-foot sea, and light winds east of Kodiak Island with variable flow inside of Shelikof Strait and 3-foot seas. Inside of Bristol Bay, a light wind, 10 knots with 1-foot seas there, 5 to 6-foot seas across the Pacific coast, 15 knots. Southeasterlies Across the Pacific coast, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea for your Thursday, and not a lot of change for Friday there, with light and variable flow. 1 to 2-foot seas expected across the Bering Sea coast, and 5 to 6-foot seas there as you head from Castle Cape to Chignik and all the way down toward King Cove and Falls Pass for your Friday. For the Aleutians, northwesterlies from Unalaska down toward Atka and Adak, 15 knots there with 4 to 5-foot seas, 3-foot seas closer to Unalaska. Southwesterlies from Unalaska to Nikolsky, 7-foot seas all the way out toward Adak, and southerlies moving in a little bit stronger from Adak toward Attu, 6-foot seas expected there, 20 to 25 knots from the south. For your Friday, southerlies continue for the central chain. Northwesterlies light just west of Nikolsky, 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. Southwesterlies a little stronger from Nikolsky to Unalaska. And out west, we're keeping our gales 30 to 35, looking for 13 to 18-foot seas to wrap up your Friday. Just a few more minutes left here, and you'll notice northerlies across St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, and a light and variable flow from St. Matthew toward Nunivak Island, 1 to 4-foot seas there. Southeasterlies around the Kuskokwim Delta, and a 2-foot sea around St. Paul and St. George. Into Friday, easterlies across St. Lawrence Island, southeasterlies around Nunivak Island, and you'll see that southeasterly flow as you head down the coast with a 3-foot sea, 2-foot seas around St. Paul, and 4-foot seas for St. Matthew. Up north, easterlies broad across the north slope, 15 to 20 for the Beaufort Sea coast, 30 knots west of Wainwright, and 15 to 25 as you head down toward Cape Lisburne and Kotzebue Sound. Still over the ice for your Thursday and for Friday for that matter. 10 to 20 knots across the Chukchi coast, 15 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound. 20 knots for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast there for Friday on the north slope. Let's look at your marine forecast, and with just a few more minutes left here, we'll take a look at southeast. Low pressure sitting just off the coast of Sitka, 1,000 millibars, showing us that periods of onshore flow will continue for southeast. Some light rain is expected there, and you'll see more clouds, but you'll also see very mild weather. Periods of rain and snow showers should continue across south central and southeast, and snow showers expected around parts of the Seward Peninsula down the southwest coast, with a few rain and snow showers there, generally north of Nunivak Island. Once we
These
get into
forecasts
Friday,
are to be
we'll
used
back
for
in
planning
similar
purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.